Hello to anybody this reaches. I'm trying this again. It's a little hard. I had to step over my cord. This is my history exam. I'm going to try to keep this under 10 minutes because I value my time and I value your time. So this is my history exam for weeks 2 through 4. I'll be covering everything that we just covered in class from these 2 weeks. So let's start with our Northern Renaissance, and this was our Wednesday class. So what was it? So this is in response to the Southern Renaissance because these upper countries in Europe, Germany, the geography isn't working right now, they don't like Italy having cool stuff without them being inside of it. So they have their own Renaissance, new ideas, new thinkers, new paintings, new ideas of thinking. Humanism isn't a big part of it. And it's less focused on the religious side of things like the Italian Renaissance was, and more focused on the humanistic side of things like where do we come from? What's our anatomy? What's actually science? It was less focused on God and Christ and more focused on ourselves. So that's what it was. How does it affect today? It affects today in a lot of ways. From us understanding our own bodies with our arms and our hands and our legs and all that stuff. It really opened a lot of doors for a lot of people because we're always so closed thinking under the rule of the Catholic Church, because if you were Catholic, you couldn't question anything. And Catholics didn't want you questioning anything because they have the ultimate truth, the Bible, God and Christ, and they didn't want anybody questioning anything. And this is why the Northern Renaissance is so important, because we started questioning these things and trying to learn new things outside of what the church was teaching us. So let's talk about our Southern Renaissance. The Southern Renaissance was kind of like the Northern Renaissance, but only in Italy. We had really big painters like Michelangelo, Leonardo, Donatello, and Raphael. We had the Sistine Chapel, we had a Pope, we had Catholicism rising like crazy in Italy, and it's still there today, especially with the Vatican being in near Rome. So it really was more focused on the religious side of things, unlike our Northern Renaissance, and this happened before our Northern Renaissance, right after the Black Plague. So we really started turning from, oh no, here's all this death, now here's all this life. So we're going to be talking a lot about God and what he represents and what we really want from him as a father in heaven, and the Catholic Church is really going to be helpful in that. But the problem with the Catholicism at this point is that their sermons are only in Latin, and most people can't understand Latin and they can't read the Bible because it's in Latin. So that was a really big problem with people understanding their religion and what they believe. So they were kind of like forced into something they really didn't understand. But the Southern Renaissance was really huge, primarily because of all the art and the new ways of thinking. And Leonardo da Vinci had a lot of new ideas, like how does a canon work? And he tried to sell these ideas to multiple princes. How does it affect today? It really affects today with the way Catholicism is viewed, because this later leads on to the Protestant Reformation and the Sistine Chapel and all these other art pieces from these amazing artists from this time. And it also really bolsters the religious side in Italy. And the Catholics have their main place there, like I mentioned earlier, and the Pope, and everybody was starting to get a little more understanding of what they actually believed through art and what they wanted to see through art, and people were expressing themselves in new ways. So let's talk about Protestant Reformation. What was it? It was kind of like a split from the Catholic Church. So we are a Catholic Church who only spoke Latin, and our Bible is in Latin. Here comes Martin Luther, and he translates our Bible from Latin to German. He translates the Bible from Latin to German. And that opens a lot of doors for new people because they could never read the Bible, and people are starting to learn and understand how to read. Thanks to the printing press, this is so much easier to create. So he translates it one time through, and he uses this newfound idea of the printing press to really bolster the production of these Bibles, and more people can start actually reading what they've been taught at church. And the Catholics do not like this at all because they believe that the Bible is so holy that only the fathers can read it. So that was a really big problem. But now we have Catholicism and Protestantism, and they're going to always clash with each other. And we'll be talking about some of those wars here pretty soon. And how does it affect today? It affects today in many ways, because I see on social media platforms, as a Protestant guy and my friend being Catholic, he and I get along very well because I respect Catholic traditions and I partake in them. I just don't go to their church. I was baptized Catholic when I was an infant, and then I made my own decision here almost 2 years ago in a Protestant church. So most Catholics wouldn't appreciate me doing that, but it's fine. But it really affects today because Protestants and Catholics cannot get along. And it's crazy because they believe in the same idea. They still believe that there's the Holy Trinity, God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit, but they can't get along with Sola Scriptura, or the way we take bread and wine, or if it's grape juice. There's so many issues that the Catholic Church or Protestants have with the Catholic Church that really makes them clash with each other, and they can't get along even though they believe this almost the exact same thing primarily. So let's talk about our consequences of our Protestant Reformation. So one of the consequences is that our Pope sends a letter to Martin Luther and is like, hey, you're gonna stop what you're doing now, or you're gonna get exiled and never be seen again. Martin Luther does what no sensible man would do, and burns it. He burns the letter and has a big party, which is going to lead to a lot of wars and a lot of deaths in many places. So here are some of the wars: Protestants killing Catholics and Catholics killing Protestants, and people trying to kill Martin Luther while he's on his way to go see the Pope and their trial for him to see what's going to happen next for Martin Luther. And there's just always these clashes between Protestants and Catholics, and they're killing each other even though they believe the same thing, because they can't get along because it's not perfectly intertwined with each other. So like I just said, this really affects today in the way that Protestants and Catholics still cannot get along. And it doesn't make any sense because they believe the same thing, like I mentioned earlier. But it also affects today for people questioning different kinds of religion, because at the same time we had our Muslims, we had our Buddhists, we had our monks, we had our Catholics, we had our Christians, we had all these other religions, and then since Catholicism broke apart, it wasn't one centralized thing, and then Protestantism just fell into all these branches: Lutheranism, Presbyterians, Baptists, Nazarene, all these other branches that were not one unified church like the Catholic churches, and they don't have a major leader like the Pope or the Vatican or cardinals or saints, and they believe these different ideas of who these people actually were. So it also affects today in that way as well, to where these Protestants don't have the Pope and this whole idea of the Pope and his cardinals and all that stuff, and Catholics still have that because it's their tradition. So our 80 Years' War, what was it and how does it affect today again? Our 80 Years' War was a lot of war between a lot of kings, a bunch of Henrys, and really powerful people just trying to get at each other because we had our own countries separated by religion. So your king could choose your religion: are you Protestant or are you Catholic? And of course that's going to cause problems. So they're going to start fighting each other, even though they're all trying to get along because they're all distant cousins. It does not work out at all because it's Europe. So they don't get along and they start fighting each other like crazy. And one thing leads to another. Protestants are killing Catholics again. Kings are going to war. And eventually this family tree has so many sons that they start disagreeing with each other. So they're killing all the sons. And one of the sons, I think his name was Henry, did not have any kids. So that family tree did not want their Henry to go to a different Henry, which was a cousin, because they wanted the bloodline to go straight down mother, father, child, not cousins, because they didn't want that in their kingdoms, because they believed it was wrong, because they're not actually royal blood, they're only part of it, because they're brothers or sisters of the actual king. And it affects today in the way that countries viewed each other. It doesn't affect today primarily much as Protestantism versus Catholicism. It's basically the same idea, but it spins a new edge on royal families and how those would work if the last heir to the throne does not have any kids. So our 30 Years' War, this is a French Civil War. We have a bunch of them. What was it? How does it affect today? The French never get along with anything. So it's Protestants versus Catholics again, and they fight for 30 more years in one country, which is France. and they eventually finally come to the conclusion that they can maybe be peaceful with each other, until a few centuries later, then they have another civil war, and another civil war, and another civil war, and another civil war. It also affects today because all these wars between the Protestants and Catholics, why would you get along with people you're always fighting with? It's like having siblings, like having a sister and you're always fighting with her. You're not going to like her, and she's not going to like you, until you guys actually start to get along and you can understand each other's ideas. But this never really happens back here, because no, Catholicism is right, no, Protestantism is right, and they have to keep clashing on who's right and what France is going to be, because their king did not make a decision. Okay, that seems to be my end of my slides. Hopefully I covered everything I needed to cover. Thank you for your time. Hopefully I respected your time enough to where my video wasn't too long, and hopefully I got some extra credit for dressing up.